Welcome to the Totum Podcast. I'm Tim Irvin here with my partner, Dr. Stacy Irvin.
We are super excited that you decided to join us. We're coming to you from a live gym at Totum Life Science. Tim and I have worked in this industry for over 30 years, meaning that we have tons of great things to share with you.
Not only that, but we have great guests who will help to educate both of us and you with all things wellness.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us for part 2 of our Running for Performance and Injury Prevention here with Victoria Lavinskas. If you have not seen part 1, make sure you check that out. There's some amazing information in there.
Any more exercises that we must do?
So it's hard. There's like so many things in my head that I'm like, it depends. I'll say one of my other favorite ones is what I like to call another one of these that doesn't have a real name, but I give it a name. An isometric single leg squat against the wall. So what I mean by that is, so a single leg squat, when I observe someone doing a single leg squat, it's a really good indication to me of like how you're loading as you land on that one leg. So I'm looking at everything from what's your foot doing? Like, are you over pronating? Are you gripping with your toes, which is telling me you're lacking some strength in your foot or in your ankle? Is your knee kind of coming in, which we call that knee valgus? Is your pelvis dropping on the opposite side? Are you rolling? Like, how are you controlling that? Very often, like that for me has to be solid as well. It's like I have all these like this checklist of like I need to make sure that you have this, this is done, and a single leg squat is something that, until my running clients can do a really beautiful single leg squat, they're working on something to stabilize that. My favorite way of working on a single leg squat, and this is after we've worked on the mobility and the isolated strength component. So if, we'll use the pelvic kind of dropping or rotating kind of issue. So really when you're doing a single leg squat, ideally you want to see your hip above your knee, above your ankle, and then your opposite hip should be parallel to the, like your hips should be parallel to the ground. And there should be no rotation away. So you should have this like nice kind of square look to it, somewhat, okay? If there is weakness, and usually you'll see that in gluteus medius, and then the funny thing is if tibialis posterior, which is that muscle that we said kind of controls that pronation, if that's weak, then it actually pulls the knee in and challenges glute med more. So we often see those two being weak at the same time, or one being weak and making the other guy's job harder. I often see those things in combination, but we'll talk about just glute med. So say gluteus medius is I test that muscle and it's weak. The first thing I'm going to give you is a strengthening exercise to increase the strength of that muscle. But then I might get to the point where, wow, this is nice and strong. You've been working on this. I can tell that, my strength testing, like you're acing that. But you do your single leg squat and you're still failing. So that's not because you're weak. It's because you are not, it's your motor control and your activation. You're not using that muscle when you're supposed to be. Your muscle doesn't know that it needs to be acting in this moment to stabilize your pelvis. And that's when that single leg squat against the wall comes up, where basically, picture if we're working on the right hip. So my right side is the one that's weak. I'm going to have the left side of my body against a wall. I'm going to get pretty close to that wall because I want to do a single leg squat where I'm not leaning side to side. And then my inside leg is going to kind of bend and I'm going to stick it to the wall. And then with my right leg, so my right leg is standing alone now, I'm going to think of hinging from the hip first. So it's not just a hip hinge, but I want to initiate the movement with my hips, so I make sure that I'm using my glutes and not so much my quads. Mm-hmm. So if I'm squatting forward, so if I start my squat by bringing my knees forward, my quads are going to take over, and that's going to be like the main holder of the movement. Whereas if I start the initiation of the movement, so it's not that your knee can't come forward, but if you start with that hip hinge and kind of bending at the hip, your glute has that kind of, now it's stabilizing your pelvis, now it's in control, and now your quad can help. It's a big thing I tell people. So you kind of initiate a little bit with that little hip hinge. Your knee totally can come forward afterwards. You're bending both your hip and your knee, but your butt's sticking out, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's, okay, so let's just break it down so that our listeners, I know this is, it's hard to describe exercise.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, the macro, I'm coming back to macro pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay, so we are facing sideways to the wall.
Yes.
Do we want to,
what color is the wall?
Or do you want to shoulder, like what do you think?
No, so I usually get like arms out, like just you can cross your arms in front of your body, like just out of the way.
Out of the way. What's touching the wall?
So just my hip, my thigh, and the whole side of my leg.
That whole side's touching the wall.
Yes.
Right. And so then the other leg is going to be the leg that's kind of like not squatting, that's in the air, is going to be going behind. Like,
Sorry, wait. So if you're against, so if I'm working on my right side, so my right side's the
Right
weak
side's
side.
against the wall.
My left side's against the wall.
okay.
Okay, left side's against
My
the
left side's
wall.
against the wall.
Yeah.
So the leg I'm working is the leg that's on the outside.
outside. Okay,
So the other
okay.
leg is just on the wall. It's not really doing much.
That's what I pictured.
There you go.
Okay.
And then the other leg, so you're hinging from the hip, and then with that leg that's on the ground, you are using that leg to push yourself into the wall.
Right.
And what that does is it helps you to engage glute
Okay.
med.
I like that.
Yeah.
So the work
Hard to explain.
is being done on a leg away from the wall.
That's correct. Yes.
And I think just to clarify too, for people who don't know, hip hinge is essentially like you're kind of sticking your bum out behind you.
So if you're going to sit down, it's like the first 10% of
You were going to sit in a chair.
Stop.
Okay. And how many reps? And
So this is one that I like to do an isometric hold. So especially when we're trying to do an activation.
Yeah.
It can turn into a dynamic exercise, but I like it 3 times 20 seconds, like a total of a minute, and you're alternating side to side, engaging. So it's a good way of like
Nice.
waking up glute med, so it
just holding.
understands what that is doing, and then eventually you could do 10 reps. Again, we're talking about like pre-running or on a daily basis to kind of wake these things up. You could do a dynamic version of that where you're going up and down, thinking about pushing into the wall. Hard to explain, but
no, I know it's funny. We're sitting beside the brick wall and I can't help imaging it happening on the brick wall. And then I'm picturing like, I'm stuck on the brick wall, but no.
Did you want to wall
do it on
slide
a wall,
down?
you can slide down. Yeah. Okay. And I think
A slidey wall.
Sliding wall.
a sliding wall. One other point would be that there's no harm in setting your phone up and videoing yourself doing these things, so that, because not everyone's in a gym with these beautiful big mirrors, and you want to make sure there's no point in practicing in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Especially the heel raises. It's super important to know like what direction are your feet going, how can you correct that. So I think you set up your phone, you could go to your staircase, put your phone against the wall, against it, and just go through double heel raises, watch the video, do it again, video it again, and see if you can get better. Same thing with the wall exercise. Watch the video so that you know that you're in the right position and you're doing it right. I love those exercises.
Okay, so I'm suggesting we go through some rapid fire now. I know that you really want to show us the shoe.
I mean, I want to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about.
So I think,
what do the people want?
let's just show the shoe as like what's important on the shoe.
Sure.
30 seconds.
Okay. This is not my shoe, but we're going to go with it. Lightweight. So the weight of the shoe is very important. If your shoe is very heavy and you're carrying a brick, that's going to be a lot of energy wasted.
Yep.
Number 1. Number 2, cushion. Both the thickness of the cushion, so how thick it is, and also the quality of the cushion itself. Does it have some give? The thicker and the more rigid your cushion is, the less your foot inside the shoe will know what's happening down here, right? The third thing, which I find is the most important thing in shoes, is actually to have flexibility in the middle of the shoe. So I should be able to twist this shoe a little bit like I can here. If this is a block, and we can talk about carbon plated shoes afterwards. If this is not moving at all, then you're what I like to call the control center, which is the midfoot, where those muscles like tibialis posterior peroneus longus come and attach. I like to say they like attach like a hammock, and they're doing this work to kind of control things here. If this portion of the shoe can't move, then your foot's not going to be able to do its job. The last one of the components is the drop, which is the difference between the height of the heel and the height of the toe. Back in the day, a 0 millimeter drop or below 6 millimeters used to be considered minimalist, and anything above that is max. Again, I don't even use that component when I talk about minimalism. The only time the drop I would say is important is when I think anything that has to do with Achilles issues or calf kind of length.
Yeah.
If the lower your drop is, the lower your heel has to drop before it pushes back up. So clients that I have who will have kind of Achilles issues should ideally have kind of a higher drop at least at first, so that Achilles isn't being overly loaded.
And when you say, again, just to clarify, when you say higher drop, means that the heel won't drop as much with the running.
So a higher drop of the shoe, as in the heel the heel being higher than the toe so that the heel of the foot
It's like
doesn't
your
drop as
running
much.
shoe, all running shoes,
Yeah.
except if they're completely flat,
Minimalist.
Yes.
have a higher heel
Yes.
than
Lower.
4 foot.
correct.
And so there's an angle with
There's an
that.
angle.
And it's some millimeters higher
Yes.
in the heel than it is in front.
That's correct.
And this shoe is deceiving because
You think-
this looks like, wow, that's like an inch and a half.
Yeah, so you got to look at what's difficult is figuring out like what's the inside of the shoe. I would say this has a decent drop, and actually the person who lent me these has had Achilles issues. So this is why she has a high drop. This is a higher drop, so this would be like at least a 10 millimeter drop. And that's a very useful
For her, yeah.
in certain cases. So that's why I don't think about that when I think about when I'm that minimalism of like let your foot do what it can. And the last component, like I was saying before, is just like it has to be comfortable on your foot. Everybody's foot is different. So when you put this on, does it feel like a nice cloud? And does it feel like can you wiggle your toes?
Yeah.
Or are you feeling a pressure somewhere and like your toes feel cramped? Like that's not a good thing. So I'd say those are the important components of a shoe.
A big toe
The
box.
30 seconds is up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a minute ago.
Again, from a practical standpoint, encouraging people to get the shoes on, jog around a bit in the store. Don't just put them on and not walk around in them, because lots of people do that, and lots of people are looking at what the shoes look like. It's not the best way to buy your jogging shoe. It's nice to buy your fashion running shoe that way, and we have so many options for that.
Yes.
But for your jogging shoe, get it on, run around the store a bit so that you know that it does feel good for you. And most of the good running shoe stores, and there's not many.
There are not.
There are not many. I have, I think, 4 that I send people to in Toronto.
Yep.
They will take shoes back if you get them and you go out in your first run and it's a problem, because now these shoes are an investment.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the carbon ones are 500 and
sometimes.
up.
Yeah.
So let's mention that. What do you think about the carbon?
So, okay, so the carbon plated shoes, and I think this is true for everyone. And if you go to a store, they will tell you this. These are not shoes that you run in every day. They are performance shoes. They have a very short lifespan, and they shouldn't be used a ton.
Not a regular training shoe. They are an event.
There's event shoe, exactly. That kind of performance event shoe. So a lot of people will, I tell my clients, if you get a carbon plated shoe, like wear it maybe on one run during your training, and then you wear it on the day, like, or like very few times.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's very lightweight, but it is the opposite of all the minimalist descriptions in terms of it has zero flexibility, because it has this carbon plate in it. I always tell people you want to train so that your feet are really nice and strong, kind of like you're talking about your track athletes. Like make sure that what's inside that shoe is really nice and strong, and that's what your minimalist shoes during your training are going to do for you, is make sure that your foot and all the muscles in there are ready to work. Then you get into that carbon plated shoe, and then the kind of kinetic energy that's transferred because of that carbon plate allows you to be faster and propel your weight, propel yourself forward faster. But also you have all the strength in the foot that and the calf that you've been working on, so you're using that as you're going. Whereas if you're not training your foot before, your foot is just like, no, what's happening in that shoe. So that's kind of the difference there. So I'm a fan of them in the sense that I know that they improve performance. So if you're like looking to shave some time and you have the money to buy carbon plate shoes, go for
expensive.
it. Just don't train in them like on a regular basis, because you will get injured.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to something you said before, which I think is like 2 points about buying shoes. So one, so many of us love to online shop. I'm definitely one of those people. Shoes are just not the thing to online shop. Like you have to try them on. You have to have the right size. It has to feel right. You have to be able to feel them. Sometimes people send me a photo like, what do you think about this shoe? Do you think it's flexible? I'm like, I don't know this brand. I don't know this model.
Yeah.
You need to be able to like pick it up. Like, is it light? Do you have some flexibility in it? You can't do that online. And the other thing is you talked about like putting it on and running a little bit. So some running stores will have you put on a shoe and walk. And I'm like, walking and running are very different things. Running is not speed walking. It's its own thing. So you will land differently when you run than you do when you walk. We're not supposed to, when we're running, we're not supposed to go heel to toe. We're supposed to land on that midfoot. And so you need to practice that as well. You can't, walking and running are not the same thing. And one thing that I'm thinking about right now, your running shoes should only be for running. When you buy a pair of shoes that are for running, they are only your running shoes. You don't walk in shoes that you run in, because you will wear them out differently, given that we land differently and we walk differently than we run.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I think too, asking at the store, different shoes are more durable and will give you more mileage. And so when you're making this investment, and again, this only happens at the good stores.
Yeah.
This does not happen from the teenager helping you at Sport Check. I love them, but they don't,
I told everybody 10 minutes ago that we're into rapid fire questions.
Okay, sorry.
This is why we need you to,
I've got another rapid fire.
Okay, hey, so I'm just going to say check the mileage. I go to a good store, and then when you're making the decision, depending on what you're going to use the shoe for, check the mileage. Otherwise, you're going to wear through that shoe and have to buy another one, in 3 months' time. So figure that out.
Okay, second rapid fire question.
Slowest rapid fire murder.
I wouldn't say how long rapid was going to be. Most common, 3 most common causes of running related injuries.
So too much too soon. So not progressively loading. Obviously weakness, or like, it's hard to say because it could be a lot of different areas. And the shoe, like the shoe is a big thing. That was pretty rapid fire.
Totally rapid fire.
That was pretty rapid fire.
Okay, here's a good rapid fire follow-up.
Learners.
Most important. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of geeky stuff.
Yep.
Tibialis, posterior, and all things like that. And people go like, "Oh, tell me more anatomy. I want to." Anyway,
I know, I'm such a nerd.
So let's bring it back to macro level. The people are going to listen to some of this and not pay any attention to it. They just want to know, what are 3 things that I need to do before I go run?
Right. So
to really, like, over the next 4 weeks, just tell me 3 times a week I'll do it. What are the things I need to do?
Well, those 3 exercises we mentioned before, I would recommend.
Calf raises.
The calf raises, the high lunge, and then that's single leg squat against the wall.
Okay.
Making sure you have the right shoe. So like, speak to somebody who knows what they're doing and make sure that you have a good shoe that is not worn out. And then have a plan, I would say, are the big things.
How do you progress?
Yeah, like you need to have like how are you going to start and how are you going to continue? And that's one of the things that I talk to my clients about. And I'm a big fan of the run walk programs. But I think those are the 3 things, like before you go, like, mobility, strength, flexibility, that stuff. And so those are there's so many other things. Like, it depends on the person. I can't say, like, this is not a blanket like statement exercises, but that component. So see us, if you have a physiotherapist or somebody who can assess you, have a look at what's kind of lacking there. Exactly. Make sure you have a shoe that is appropriate for running, that is only for running, that is not fully worn down, and then have a plan. Like, what's your...
Would it be reasonable to say, okay, the longest I ran last year was September. I did a 5K.
Yeah.
Okay, so I trained, I did 6K in my training, I did a 5K run. So rather than go out and do a 5K run first time out, day 1, do a K, a kilometer.
Not even.
Okay, so how would you, over a 4-week period, let's say you're going to run 3 times a week, that's 12 runs. What's my progression through that? Because that's a good...
Absolutely. So this is where I have this one program that is my kind of like my main program, and I adjust this based on who's in front of me and what their current mileage is. So if you're someone who hasn't run since September, we are now March. That's a long time. The very first run you do is actually 10 minutes total, where you're alternating between 1 minute of running and 1 minute of walking. So again, I'm a big fan of run walk programs for a few reasons. One, it prevents you from going too far too fast, because you're running and then walking and then running and walking and running and then walking. You're giving your body a bit of a break in between. You're doing the first time it's 10 minutes total, alternating 1 on, 1 off. You're only really running 5 minutes. But you know what? The next day, your calves might be sore. And guess what? If you had done that 5K, you'd be like wrecked right now, right? Like, it's that you go slow enough that it gives your body a chance to kind of say like, oh, okay, hold on. Like this, I can do this, or I need a little bit more practice, or that was too much, right? It's also a great way of integrating, like changing shoes or changing technique. It allows you to focus on something for a minute, and then you're not your brain's gonna get really tired. So then like for a minute, kind of walk it off and don't think about it. So it depends on when I'm giving people specific recommendations based on, they changed their shoes and they've never run in this kind of shoe before. I'm telling them to work on cadence or noise, that kind of stuff, which we could talk about later. That one on, one off allows them to incorporate those things. You can't go out for a 5K run and be like, hey, think about this the whole time. Like your brain will explode. So that first run is usually, like I said, 10 minutes total, one on, one off. So you're really only running 5 minutes. I stick to a 1 run, 1 walk, and increase the whole duration by 5 minutes every time until you get to 30 minutes. So then you're at 30 minutes total time where you're doing 1 minute on, 1 minute off. So you're really only running 15 minutes. Once you've hit that spot, then you're going into, okay, I'm going to stick to 30 minutes, but now I'm going to do 2 minutes running, 1 minute of walking, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and 9, 1, and then you get to 30 minutes continuous. So it's actually, my program has 14 runs.
Right.
And can I say how we get through this program? It will be rapid fire.
3 more seconds in this 30-second answer.
So my rules are, you do a run, everything feels great. As in, like, that run felt like my body felt great, my cardio felt great during and within 24 hours after. That felt easy. Check, do the next one on the list. You do a run and your body is sore. So I'm not talking about pain. I'm talking like I've been to the gym for the first time in a while and I feel my muscles. That's your body saying, I was able to do that, but that was tough. I need practice. Let's do that again. You're going to repeat that run until there's no soreness. If you do a run and there's pain, and that can be either during the run or within those 20, it's that 24-hour period is really important. I feel my knee. Okay, you probably did too much. Now wait for that knee pain to go away, and the next time you run, you're going to do the last run that didn't hurt. And that's how people should actually be progressing. I think even in the gym with exercises they do, you should listen to your body that way. If you just lifted really heavy weights and the next day you're super sore, the next workout is not the one where you lift even heavier. Your body's already telling you, like, you challenged me. Let it master that before you move on to the next step. And that's what makes a really strong runner, is when you have that patience to kind of listen to your body and build, as opposed to constantly pushing your body.
I like that. That's
good.
great.
Do you have a rapid fire question?
A rapid fire question.
You don't have to. I've got another one.
You go for it.
Okay. So strength training, mobility. Is there anything else that we need to put in there that would help people not get injured and or help people have a better performance?
Well, we can get into like technique stuff, which is my 3 big technique things that I look at are going to be foot strike, noise, and cadence. And so I would say somebody who is
Noise being how much sound,
how much noise you're making when you land. Okay. Now, someone who isn't doing a running assessment, I would usually say that there's 2 things I can tell them to work on that, regardless of what they're doing, should help or is not dangerous to do if you haven't seen a professional, is thinking about being light on your feet. So that's where we talk about the noise component. So, and some people will say, like, I feel really heavy when I land, or I'm really loud when I land. And one thing I love is if I go for a run, I often scare people because I've worked so much on being light on my feet that people will only notice that I'm behind them when I'm like crossing.
And then you come up and you're like, oh.
Yeah. And that's how you know, like, if somebody's turning around and you're like way behind them, they probably can hear you, because I'm usually listening to music. But that's where that whole, like, we were talking about how running is an impact sport and there's a good way of loading and a bad way of loading. You know, you can, I'm not going to do it now because I'll shake the whole table, but you could land really heavy on your feet and then you could land really light on your feet. And the only difference if you jump the same height is the amount of muscle work you put in to absorb that shock. So that's what I tell my clients. I say, if you're really loud, you're probably not absorbing that shock as much with your muscles. So you're putting a ton of impact into your skeleton, which we don't want. So just try to be quiet. And some they say, oh, I don't know if I'm being quiet. Just the thought of trying to be quiet, well, you don't have to think about it, but you'll naturally engage your muscles.
It's actually easy on a treadmill because treadmills are
you can hear
kind of hollow underneath the belt.
Yeah.
And like when somebody's on the treadmill here, that's a heavy lander or a slapper.
A slapper.
It's like really loud.
It's really loud. Yeah.
In comparison.
So just one more thing about that too is it's an interesting thing about how you increase the volume, because when you're working on these technique things, the one thing that will ruin your technique is when you're tired and you're not in shape to maintain that technique. And I just watched a bunch of videos of the track athletes. They had a meet on the weekend. And we're working on a lot of things with posture, and it's fun to watch on the 400. They start off so beautifully, and then, they're coming around that last thing, and I'm just cringing. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to your beautiful posture? And so one thing that we said we were going to work on is arms are a big thing for sprinting. Mm-hmm. And we work on them a lot. We work on them in the mirror. Mm-hmm. But I said, take the time of your actual race. Lots of times we get bored with these technical things, right? And we lose our longevity and our concentration. But I said, if you're running a 400 meters, you know what your time is, set your timer, do your arms perfectly for the 50 seconds or whatever it is. And I think with some of these technique things too, when it starts to go, it can be gone because you don't have the conditioning to maintain it.
Yeah. So that's also where that 1 minute on, 1 minute off is great, because you can focus on it for a minute, but then okay, take a break. Yeah. And then the other big component people can work on is cadence. So I think some people have heard of cadence, some people haven't. Your cadence when you're running is the number of steps per minute that you're taking. So there is an ideal, which is somewhere between 165 and 185. So that's the kind of the zone you want to be in. And that translates into very short strides, small steps. People often think that these nice, big, long strides are actually really good for you, but they're very inefficient, and you waste a lot of energy, and you're actually more likely to land on your heel, therefore more likely to add a lot more impact into your skeleton. So small steps, small, quiet steps are the kind of the easy thing to get people to work on if they're just starting.
And 165 to 185 is how many times each foot. Yeah, so total amount of foot strikes within a minute. So left foot, right foot is 2.
That's correct. Okay. And if you don't have a smart watch that calculates that for you, then I always tell people, if you have a watch or a way of looking at the time, for 15 seconds, count every step you take, and then times 4. I have a hard time doing math while I'm running, but like you can remember that number and count it later.
I saw you actually kind of like, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring us to a close.
All right.
What I would love each of us to do, and I'll start, is a practical thing that we've picked up from this that we can sort of like, this is my favorite thing that I picked up. So for me, there's 2.
Okay.
Cheating already.
I'm making the rules.
Jesus.
The first is the elevated hip flexor stretch. I love that, and I haven't been doing that. I've been really working on my hip flexor stretch, and it's made a big difference to how my body feels.
Right.
And then the second part is that asymmetries are sleeping. I love that because obviously in this context, we're talking about running, but it's something that they're there all the time. No matter if you go play hockey, haven't played hockey for a long time, they're there. And so that concept of where are my asymmetries, I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Stacey?
I'm going to stick with the rule. I'm going to do one thing. And the one thing that stood out to me was I love the single leg 10 good heel raises. I think that's something that we can all get our head around. And it's such a good check. Like, can you do it without feeling like your calf is going to cramp or something like that? Like, can you do 10? And if you can do 10, great. You're ready to start your outdoor running program. If you can't, that's fine too. Just keep working on it until you get to that 10, and then you know that you're probably ready to head outside and do some running.
Nice. Do I have to give my favorite
You
thing?
don't have to.
Oh, can I say? I'd say I'm going to say my 2 favorite things because you said 2 things, so I'm going to say 2 things. One is like that foot strength stuff that we were talking about, where like, you're working with your track athletes a lot on that. Foot strength is so underrated, but it is so important. It is the first thing that hits the ground. If it is not strong, you're not as good as you can be. I'll say that. And then the other thing would be just like, I love explaining to people my shoe thing of like, your foot needs to feel the ground so it knows what's happening, and it needs to be able to move so it can react to the ground. Those are my like big things. I step away from talking about minimalism, just talk about like, just let your foot move. Like that's really important.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Me too.
One last thing, and it's on this foot strength, and it's actually not related to running. It's for people that are older. Like, so if you're in your 50s, 60s, or beyond, if you have lost foot strength, you have lost movement capability, and you probably don't even know it.
Yep.
And so all those little foot exercises are also good
Absolutely.
for just general movement. Awesome. Victoria, thank you very much for joining us
That
for
was
this great
fantastic.
podcast.
Thanks. I hope I didn't talk too much. It was great.
No, it's, like we've been at it for 15 minutes. That's it.
That was a long 15 minutes.
All right. Join us next time on the Totum Podcast. Thanks for being here and listening. We hope you liked this episode. And if you did, please subscribe and share it with your family and friends.
We would love to hear from you. Follow us on social media. You could send us a DM or even come visit us in real life at Totum on King West. See you soon.